the things that are easy to do, they're easy, but we rather go the hard way for whatever reason. All right, so let's go to the video real quick. Yeah, we got a couple of videos. He's gonna talk about listening. Okay, this is a TED Talk. And he's gonna talk about listening. This is William Ury. All right, so we'll go into it and then we'll talk about it after.
Listen. Why is it so important to listen? Let me tell you a story. Some years ago, I was in the country of Venezuela, serving as a third party between the government and the political opposition at a time of intense conflict, with a lot of people fearing a civil war. My colleague Francisco Diaz and I had an appointment with the president, Hugo Chavez, at 9 p.m. at the presidential palace. Finally, at midnight, we were ushered in to see the president, who had his entire cabinet arrayed behind him. And he asked me, "So, Yuri, what do you think of the situation going on here?" And I said, "Mr. President, I've been talking to your ministers here and to the opposition, and I think you're making some progress." "Progress? What do you mean, progress?" he shouted. "You're blind. You're not seeing all the dirty tricks those traitors are up to." And he leaned in very close to my face and proceeded to shout. What was I going to do? Part of me felt like defending myself naturally. But what good would it do for me to get into an argument with the president of Venezuela? How would that advance peace? So I just listened. I gave him my full attention. I listened to where he was coming from. And President Chavez was known, he was famous for making 8-hour speeches. But after 30 minutes of me just nodding and listening, I saw his shoulders slowly sag, and he said to me in a very weary tone of voice, "So Yuri, what should I do?" That's the sound of a human mind opening to listen. So I said, "Mr. President, it's almost Christmas. The country needs a break. Last year, all the festivities were canceled because of the conflict. Why not propose a truce this time so that people can enjoy the holidays with their families, and after that, everybody will maybe be in a better mood to listen?" He said, "That's a great idea. I'm going to announce that in my next speech." His mood had completely shifted. How? Through the simple power of listening.
All right. So let's go into James chapter 2, verse 19, and I'm going to comment on that video based off of the scripture right here.
It's the book of James, chapter 1, verse 19. "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath."
Okay, so when you're in a conversation with someone, your first reaction should not be to come back with a reply, to prove your point. That shouldn't be your first reaction. Your first response should be to be quick to hear, be quick to listen what the person is saying, and just as you saw in this video right here. So in the video, we showed how Hugo Chavez asked William Ury what he thought about the conflict. He gave his opinion, and Hugo Chavez started delaying him for 30 minutes. Imagine 30 minutes, you just getting
one-sided conversation.
One-sided conversation. All right. But instead, because he said it in the video, he said, I wanted to defend myself, but he didn't. He just sat back, he nodded, and he listened. And rather than interrupting him to get his point across, he listened. And guess what? That allowed him to lower his defense, Hugo Chavez. All right. So that's what we gotta do, man. And because of that, Hugo Chavez was able to receive what he was gonna say with gladness. All right.
And then Yuri knew who he was dealing with.
Yep.
First, this is the president. He's got a certain level of power, and he's known for talking for a while. So when you know the type of person you're dealing with, it'll make listening easier. Okay, if this is a person that likes to talk a lot, hey, let me let them get in what they gotta say. so we can get this thing resolved.
Yes.
But if you don't know who you're dealing with, you don't know their characteristics, how they would react if you interrupt them, y'all might not get nowhere at all.
Exactly, and that's what's. It's very important for you to know who you're dealing with. Just like you said, that's that Malachi 3:16. You know, they who fear the Lord spake often one to another. That's speaking often is not just in, hey, how you doing? It's also in understanding how that person likes to communicate. You know what I'm saying? And being able to know how to deal with them on that level. Right. You know what I'm saying? Some people, you know, when it comes to, let's just say, when it comes to correction, some people need to be corrected in a certain type of way. You know what I'm saying? And you have to understand that based off of the person that you're dealing with. All right. So that's a great point. But that conversation was saved based off of the art of listening. You know, listening, waiting, and then responding when it was necessary. Okay. So we can't be quick to speak without listening, because that could actually spark that wrath. That could actually spark that anger, because you're giving that back and forth energy. It's like two sticks rubbing together. You know what I'm saying? When the two sticks rub together, then it's going to spark that fire. All right. So instead, you want to quench it, like it says in Sirach 28. You want to spit on that fire. Right. All right. And listening is one of the ways to do so. All right. Verse 20.
James chapter 1 and verse 20. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God.
All right. So it's a process. Okay. Some people have short fuses, and that wrath is just going to come no matter what. But a lot of times, you know, it's caused by the lack of listening. You know what I mean? That wrath is caused because the other party is not listening to what the other person is saying, you know, and that frustration grows into that wrath. All right. And that can be prevented. You know, the fact that we don't listen to our brothers and sisters, it's unacceptable. And you could be causing them to sin, you know, based off of you not listening. Okay. All right, so listening is loving your brother and sister is what I'm trying to say, all right? Now, how do we listen? Okay, let's go back to that video. Let's skip a little bit to 540. Let's see what he says on how we listen.
So how do we listen? Well, it turns out that we often take listening for granted as something easy and natural. But in fact, at least in my experience, real listening, genuine listening, is something that needs to be learned and practiced every day. In ordinary listening, we're hearing the words, and we're often thinking, where do I agree? Where do I disagree? What am I going to say in response? In other words, the focus is on us. In genuine listening, however, the spotlight moves to the other person. We put ourselves in their shoes. We tune into their wavelength. We listen from within their frame of reference, not just ours. And that's not easy. In genuine listening, we listen not just for what's being said, but for what's not being said. We listen not just to the words, but to what's behind the words. We listen for the underlying emotions and feelings, the underlying needs, what that person really needs or wants. Let me give you an example. About a year and a half ago, I was invited to ask a Brazilian entrepreneur.
All right, stop right there real quick.
Diniz.
All right, so in this particular clip, what he's saying is that usually when we're in a conversation with somebody, we're looking to ourselves to find out how we're going to respond to that particular situation. Whatever that person's saying, in our mind, we're like, okay, what do I say next? Okay, but what he's saying is that's not the way to be. You know, he's saying that you have to put yourself in their shoes in order to be able to have active listening and to listen effectively. So I want y'all to think about it. Put yourself in your last argument, your last conversation, and your last discussion. Were you listening to respond, or were you listening to understand? All right. Were you listening to get your point across, or were you listening to find out that other person's perspective?
And this is a good game that, really anybody can play it, but husbands and wives can play it.
Man, yes.
Y'all can come up, have a day where y'all just get together and y'all practice listening. Have your wife say a bunch of stuff, and you listen attentive to what she's saying, and then you try to write down what you heard her say.
Yes.
Don't show it to her yet. Just write down what you heard her say, then her do the same thing, and then y'all can recite it and see how well you listen. And if you don't listen well at first, don't take it bad, and wives don't get mad. Oh, you wasn't listening to me. Just keep trying it, and then over time you could, dang, this time he actually said everything that I said. You were listening well. Exactly. This time she actually was able to write down everything I said. She was listening well, and imagine how far that would help your marriage.
Man.
Especially when y'all have disagreements and stuff like that.
Oh, man, most definitely. I'm glad you said that. That's definitely on point. And that genuine listening, it's going to breed effective communication. As he talked about, it puts the spotlight on the other person, just as you were saying. You put the spotlight on your husband or on your wife. Instead of trying to reply, you actually focus on listening, and listening to the points that they say. All right. Okay, so let's go to the 7-minute mark in that video.
About a year and a half ago, I was invited to ask a Brazilian entrepreneur by the name of Abilio Diniz to help him because he was trapped in a titanic legal dispute with his French business partner over the control of Brazil's largest retailer. The Financial Times called it perhaps the biggest cross-continental boardroom showdown in recent history. It had gone on for 2.5 years, and it was immensely costly and stressful, not only to both parties, but to their families and the 150,000 employees of the company. So when I sat down with Abilio in his home, I listened to his story, and after that I had a question. I said, Abilio, help me understand here. What do you really want? And he said, well, I want the stock at a certain price. I want, the company headquarters. I want the elimination of the non-compete clause. And he gave me a list. But I, as I listened, heard something deeper there that was unspoken. So I asked him, Abilio, you're a man who seems to have everything. What are these things really going to give you? What do you most want in your life? And he paused for a moment and thought about it. And finally he said, freedom. I want my freedom. I want to be free to pursue my business dreams, and I want to be free to spend time with my family. That was it. I was hearing the human being behind the words, not just the champion businessman. And so once we were clear about his deepest need, then the negotiation itself, while challenging, became a lot easier. And in 4 short days, my colleagues and I, by listening to the other side, were able to take this titanic dispute and resolve it with a settlement that left both sides highly satisfied. As Abilio, who became a friend in the process, later told me, I got everything I wanted, but most importantly, I got my life back. How did that happen? Through the simple power of listening.
All right, so he gives another example, another story as he was talking to someone, and he was given all these requests about what he wanted. I want this, I want that. And so as he was actively listening, he understood. He was like, why is he asking about getting all these things? There was something behind what he was saying. And that's what we got to realize in our conversation. We were talking about marriage. That's a good example, because everybody communicates differently. Right. I'm not going to say every man communicates like this, but in most cases, men communicate based off of logic, right? Men communicate based off of, okay, I see this happened, so this is how I'm gonna respond to it. Right. Women, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, it's based off of emotion. It's based off of we got all cases over here.